As many of you, almost all of you know, I'm Norton Mezvinsky, and as the president of and on behalf of the International Council for Middle East Studies, I welcome you to this program. Following the talk and the comment, there will be a question and answer period for the audience. Pat Lang, who agreed to deliver a comment after the talk, unfortunately became ill a couple days ago and therefore cannot be with us today. But fortunately, Mark Perry has agreed to make a comment after the talk. Mark Perry, as most of you here know, is a well-known political commentator and author. In addition to his commentaries and advice about various Middle East issues, he has written excellent books on United States political history. The latest published book is titled The Most Dangerous Man in America, The Making of Douglas MacArthur. In regard to the Middle East, his book, Telling It to Terrorists, is worthy of special mention. Mark Perry's published articles on significant Middle East issues and his sought-after advice on these same issues make him a relevant authority. Perhaps especially relevant for today, for this session, Mark has written about some of what our speaker is going to discuss. Our speaker today is Dr. Amatzio Bahram. Dr. Bahram is Professor Emeritus of History and the Director for Iraq Studies at the University of Haifa in Israel. He served on the Israeli desk of military intelligence as an analyst when the Iran-Iraq War began in 1980. His PhD dissertation at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem dealt with Baathi, Iraq. He has taught at the University of Haifa since 1986. Between 1989 and the present, Professor Bahram has been a resident fellow at numerous international research institutions, including St. Anthony's College, Oxford University, UK in 1989 and 1990. He was a senior fellow at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars 3 times in 1990, 1997-98, and 2003-2004, and twice at the U.S. Institute for Peace in 1997-1998 and 2003-2004. He served at the Brookings Institute in 2002 to 2003, was a senior fellow at the Rockefeller Foundation Center in Bellagio, Italy, and taught as the Goldman Chair Professor at Georgetown University in Washington, 1998-99 and 2010-2011. Professor Bahram has lectured on Iraqi society with an emphasis on the tribes of Iraq for the American military between 2005 and 2009. He has advised the Israeli government since 1960 and advised the U.S. government about Iraq and the Gulf during the Reagan, Bush, Clinton, and Bush administrations. Professor Bahram has been interviewed about Iraq by many television and radio stations. Professor Bahram has written 4 books and more than 70 articles, which have appeared in journals and professional magazines. In 2010, his book, written in conjunction with 2 colleagues, Iraq Between Occupations, Perspectives from 1920 to the Present, was published. His most recent book, Saddam Hussein and Islam, 1968-2003, Baathi, Iraq, From Militant Secularism to Faith, was published in 2014. Professor Bahram is clearly a highly recognized authority on Iraq, and I am sure that we are anxious to listen to and to consider his remarks. Professor Amatzio Bahram.
Thank you very much, Norton. Is this working? Excellent. Oh, you have my notes.
Oh, well, I won't take those.
You can give the lecture if you want.
No.
I was afraid of that. First of all, it's an honor to be here, and I'm very grateful for the invitation, Norton. Just 2 small, tiny corrections. In the military intelligence, before the military intelligence service, I was a tank battalion commander, and they took all my tanks and gave them to the Lebanese phalanges. So I was a battalion commander without tanks. It was very embarrassing. And so I switched to becoming the commander of 6 desks, basically 6 desks at the Armored Corps Command, which was even more embarrassing. And that's when the military intelligence asked them to loan me to them, and that's as soon as Saddam invaded Iraq. So Saddam made me an important man, because when Saddam invaded Iran, nobody knew who Saddam was. In Israel, we knew a little bit, but not very much. And I was an Israeli academic specialist on Saddam. And so I moved very happily to military intelligence. For 14 years, I was at the head of the Iraqi desk at the Israeli military intelligence. That was fun, as a reservist, by the way, all of it as a reservist. Some of the things I learned helped me eventually in my career, even though I couldn't use them directly, as you must understand. This was all several highly classified information, and I had somehow to how do you say, to legitimize it, to legalize it, to make it legal. So I had to find sources. So you still have to do the hard work, anyway, the legwork. What I'd like to do, I wrote more than 5 books. I wrote 7 books by now, but the last one has just came out, as Norton said, by Saddam Hussein and Islam, by the Woodrow Wilson Center, to whom I owed my soul after hosting me for 3 years, and by Johns Hopkins University Press. Nobody knows about this book, because Johns Hopkins, I learned too late that Johns Hopkins University Press don't have any publicizing system. They just print a book and then put it on the shelf, and then it's being lost. So I'm just telling you there is such a book, which is interesting. And again, the editors turned down my suggestion for a title. That the suggested title was either the conversion of Saddam Hussein, or Saddam Hussein as a born-again Muslim, and then so on and so forth. And they rejected it. They said it's too sexy. And for an academic book, the title has to be very boring. So now the title is very boring: Saddam Hussein and Islam, and so on. But anyway, much of the information in that book I took from hundreds and hundreds of conversations I listened to between Saddam and his party and military luminaries, which you can find, now it's closed down again, but which I could find at the time at the National Defense University, CRRC. And some of the things I heard there, and I'm sitting really like a fly on the wall in the most sacrosanct, I don't know, holy place of Saddam's regime. And it was fascinating. The way he talks, the way he speaks, the way they listen to it, the way they reply, the way they respond, what they say, what they don't say, when they are silent in shock, and when they are saying, everything was fantastic. And some of those things knocked my socks, and I mean knocked my socks, and I fell off my chair. So funny and so amazing. So anyway, it's a treasure, and probably it's going now to the Pentagon doesn't have the money for it. I'm very sorry about that. They have a very small, I heard that they have a very small budget, very, very small budget of something like $500 billion, something tiny. And the cost of keeping the CRRC open at the National Defense University is about $800,000 a year. So we are talking here about a sad decision. What I'd like to say today is obviously about the connection between ISIS and Iraq, how ISIS grew up from the Iraqi reality, and what do we see today. And the subjects will be basically who is ISIS, what happened in Tikrit and Ramadi much more recently now, the Sunnis, what the tribes want. You know this wonderful film, What Women Want? Did you see this film? Am I too old for you? Because it's a beautiful film, What Women Want. But now the question is, what do the Sunnis want? It's a fascinating question because the confusion is unbelievable. And then, of course, what Shias want. And the confusion there is no less. Then the American options. What are your options? Assuming you're all Americans. And I'll try to end it up by 4 to 5 different possible scenarios, or if you wish, trajectories. What most likely might happen. I can see 4 or 5 options which look to me like the most reasonable ones. But of course, eventually we find out that we are all wrong and something totally different happened. Well, that's okay. All we can do is to try. About who is ISIS. First of all, one has to understand, and that's something which people here don't understand, and even in Israel, people who haven't ever worked on Iraq don't quite understand and don't realize. The key to the birth of ISIS, the first sort of incidence, move, event, is Khomeini's rise to power in Tehran. That's absolutely the key. Because this ignited for the first time in this century and in the last century, and 2-3 centuries earlier than that, I'd say from the 17th century, you didn't have Sunni-Shi'i conflicts on any meaningful scale. Until the 17th century, yeah, you did. Maybe late 17th, early 18th, but that's it. But all of a sudden, Khomeini's rise to power in Tehran meant Sunni-Shi'i confrontation. If you listen to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the caliph, carefully, when he conquered Mosul, I am then fast forward, when he conquered Mosul in June, about just over a year and a few days ago, he declared his first declaration, before he even declared himself to be a caliph. He said, we are here to settle the accounts with the Shia. Tasfiyat al-hisab ma'a and we intend to go to Baghdad and through Baghdad to Karbala and level Karbala to the ground. That's Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. That's his manifesto. Okay, that's his raison d'etre. When did it begin? With Khomeini's rise to power. I'll just remind you, the Shah's relations with Iraq were good by 1979, February, and Khomeini came to power. Good, no less than good. Quite a lot of trust, amazingly. These two dictators seem to sort of like each other in a bizarre way. And the Saudis were not really worried about the Shah. The Gulf Arabs, not really. Nothing. Sadat was not worried about the Shah at all. He was his friend. So all of a sudden you have a power which is not just imperial, but it's also very religiously well-defined, very well-defined. Poof, the whole thing. And to me, it was like the sky opened, because all of a sudden they see all these historical rivalries rising from the ashes. This was then, I'd say, if you wish, 1979. The next one, of course, which resulted from that was the Iraq-Iran war. I have a few of Saddam's generals whom I know reasonably well, and all of them told me the war against Kuwait was stupido, but the the war against Khomeini was absolutely essential. He represented an existential threat to Iraq. I don't know if I can agree, but that's how they see it even to this very day, today. So you have that. Then I'll just remind you that in 1991, when you destroyed Saddam's military in the Gulf War, what you call the Gulf War, we call it the Second Gulf War, never mind, 1991, there was a huge Shi'i revolt. I mean, never in the history of Iraq, ever, such a revolt. And the whole South was in Shi'i revolutionary hands. The whole South, south of Baghdad. And that was a huge test to the regime and for the Shia, and eventually it was crushed with a lot of blood. So that again added to the bitterness on both sides, and the sense of danger, and of the Iranian danger, Iranian Shi'i danger. The next phase, so this is number 2. Number 3 is what Saddam called al-Hamla al-Imaniya, which means the Islamic faith campaign. Saddam Islamized Iraq, and Saddam at first did it out of sheer cynical calculations, sheer cynicism. And you hear it in the discussions, not that I ever thought otherwise. You hear the discussions, and they really he's talking about political necessity. We need to become more Islamized. He's putting it in different terms, but that's what it means. Everybody understands. And that was 1986, which is pretty early. But in 1993, he introduced the campaign of Islamization. He felt that he needed it in order to win some more public support. It was the embargo, you remember the embargo years, weapons inspectors, the whole thing. So he felt he absolutely needed it. And at first, again, it was still cynical. But I would say, starting with the Kuwait war, you see that Saddam is starting to change. Saddam is beginning to change. And by, I'd say, 1993, certainly the mid-1990s, he's becoming a real born-again Muslim. How do I know that? I couldn't tell that for sure from just listening to his public speeches, even though I suspected it. And in previous things I wrote, I said, I suspect he's becoming a born-again Muslim. But I could only suspect. But from now, when I could go to the university here, to the CRRC, I could hear him speak. I could see the memoirs, not memoirs, my mistake, the diary of his little brother, Barazan Tikriti, and it is secret. Nobody saw it before me except the guy who sort of processed it for the public, for the researchers to see. And he was not a professional historian. And he says, his brother, little brother says, I no longer understand my brother. He is sitting like a monk in a where is a monk sitting usually?
Cell.
In a cell, yes. Actually, it's very close to a cell, but yes. In a cell, and وَيَتَعَبَّدْ, and he prays to God. What is he doing? Where is God? I mean, hey, we lost the guy. He's lost. It's amazing what he's writing. And then he says to him, I warned him, if you go too far towards Islamists, usually Sunni Islamists, because the Shia Islamists, he had no rapport at all. But the Sunni Islamists, they eventually are going to slash our throats. I warned him. I received no reply from him. So he says, I don't understand this guy. My brother is strange. And a few more discussions, which I managed to say. Yes, he introduced this. And he forced it on everybody. He turned Iraq, especially the Ba'ath Party, the ruling party, but also the educational system, into an Islamist educational system. Absolutely 180-degree change from the 1970s, for example. I'll just give you this. In 1977, he declared Sharia is finished. Imagine a leader of a state, even Sisi wouldn't say today. Sharia is dead, he says. It's not good for modern life. We can't use it. It's like antiquated. Okay, a prophet, great, wonderful for him. But we have our own philosophy, he said, and that's how we are making laws. You hear that in 1977, and up front, I mean, all the schools, everybody got the copies of it. How did I get it from? It was very widely publicized, publicized. Everywhere, education system, quoted by his party members, I mean, everything. And all of a sudden, he's forcing, in the 1990s, for everybody to learn the Quran. Children at the age of 6 have to learn the Quran. They don't understand a word of it, all the way to university. And then you are being examined. Everything, tests. Even judges had to learn the Quran almost by heart because they were tested on Quranic law. Incredible. And if you fail, you cannot be a judge. And major traders, merchants, same thing. The laws of trade. By heart. This is a revolution. And perhaps the most amazing thing which he did, he forced the children, especially of middle and high school, to go and spend the summers in the mosque, in a mosque, taught Quran and Hadith by the clerics, whom he hated despised, and wanted to kill them all. But of course, which he usually did when he wanted to do, but he couldn't do that because he knew they were becoming very important, very influential. So he imposed Islam on Iraq, especially on the younger generation. And if you ask me, where is ISIS taking its soldiers? From there, from kids who studied in middle school and high school under Saddam, and some who studied in university. Even he, through Izzat Ibrahim al-Duri, his number 2, financed a circle. Now this is Ba'athi Iraq. It's Ba'athi Iraq. It's Sharia is dead. All of a sudden, he through Izzat Ibrahim is financing 2 circles in Baghdad University and in Mustansiriya and in Saddam University for Islamic Studies. And these guys, they are really, one of the circles is Wahhabi. Now you'll say to me, what Wahhabis? What do Wahhabis have to do with it? I mean, why Wahhabis? By the way, he had his own kind of Islam, which was not Wahhabi. His kind of Islam was very interesting, but not Wahhabi, definitely not. But he encouraged Wahhabis. Of course, those were good Wahhabis. What's the difference between a good Wahhabi and a bad Wahhabi? A good Wahhabi hates Saudi Arabia. A bad Wahhabi is a Saudi royal whatever. So they were good Wahhabis. They accused Saudi Arabia to falsify Wahhabism. And Uday, his son, is complaining about it in a newspaper article. We have hundreds of Wahhabis, by the way, supported by us. Why? They should be executed. Nothing is happening. Where is the intellectual leadership of ISIS coming from? From these circles. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, whose name is actually Ibrahim, Awad Ibrahim As-Samarai. He's from Samarra. He was never born in Baghdad. Never mind. Yasser Arafat, our friend, told us that he was born in Jerusalem. He was never born in Jerusalem, but it's nice to be born in Jerusalem. So Baghdadi says, I was born in Baghdad. He never was born in Samarra. But he is now the caliph, and he was a PhD student at the time in the Department for Islamic Study in Baghdad. I don't know that he was a member of this circle, but the circle was very well known. So we have all these things. And the most important contribution is this. When he became a born-again Muslim, and he did, I'll just tell you that he had 2 last things that he did, and both are, I'd say, mind-boggling, that show to me what kind of a guy he was, what kind of Islam it was. He is writing a letter to God before the Americans are pouncing on him. He's writing a letter to God. He says to him, by the way, have you ever heard about a Muslim writing a letter to God? Anybody? If you did, I want to see it. I am also a student of medieval Islam. Never. Never. And for 2 reasons. A, almost nobody could read and write, which is understandable. So how can they write a letter to God? It cannot become a religious habit. No. B, where is a postbox? When you write a letter to God, you have to put it somewhere. Now, we Jews are smart, right? We have a postbox. You know what our postbox? The Western Wall, the Wailing Wall. You put a little, yes, Shimon Peres does it. He doesn't believe in God. Shimon Peres, when he prays to Shimon Peres, believe me. But he thinks that he's God. But no, you put a little piece of paper with a request, and it's faster than email. I can tell you that responsibly. Because email takes 3 to 4 minutes until it reaches this one goes to God prompto. So we are clever. We invented the postbox. And by the way, Jews could write and read from ancient times. But he doesn't have a postbox. And he writes a letter. He invented a postbox. Don't worry about him. And he says to God, God, I have done for you so much, which is true. Teaching Quran, forcing it on everybody, Hadith, forcing on everybody, opening the mosques to that youth, which he tried to prevent them from the mosques at first. He built about 100 new mosques. He did, it's true. And then he says, so you owe me one. I want from you, God, that you guard my mustache and Iraq. In this order. I said, what does it mean? I fell off my chair. I'm not joking. I mean, to guard his mustache, what are you talking about? But of course, it came to me because I am studying Iraqi culture for the last 30 years. I never thought about it this way, but yes. He actually put in the box, which he put in the post box, he put a few hairs from his mustache. He did. And this is an old Iraqi thing. I won't tell you about it, but basically my honor, whatever. But so here is a guy who is really religious. He expects from God to reciprocate. Okay, but this is kind of religiosity for sure. Then his last order, his very last order to the Ba'athis, to his party members, he says to them, if you don't hear from me, he says the leadership, but he is the leadership. If you don't hear from me, I want you to, and the Americans are on top of us, I want you to escape to the mosques, which sounds good. He's a born-again Muslim, awesome. Befriend the ulama, the religious clerics, the clerics. Befriend the clerics. This also sounds very good, and it's a letter, and it's in handwriting. It says, and then kill them. And then kill them. So religiosity, yes, but attachment to the ulama, no, not at all. He hated them to his last moment. He wanted to establish, he started to establish his own school in Islam. There are 4 schools in Sunni Islam, 4 schools. He established number 5. Really. And these guys were attached to the 4 ones. So he would educate a whole generation to do it, to bring forth his 5th school, madhab school. All 4 are legitimate and so on, it's okay. Anyway, so if you ask me, okay, the last event that produced ISIS is the American occupation. The moment you dismantled the military in the way you did it, there was a way to do it in a much better way. In fact, not actually to do it, but to pretend to do it, but not to do it. You could have done it in a very sophisticated way. But the way the administration decided to dismantle the army sent thousands of army officers and sergeants, professional soldiers who had a war of 8 years against Iran, who learned a lot on the job, learned a lot on the job. Sent them home to Mama with the Kalashnikovs. And they knew how to use detonating charges. They knew the whole story, how to use mortars, not heavy guns, they didn't have them, but mortars, of course. And they knew where all the ammunition dumps were, you didn't. So in no time at all, you had an insurgency. When you managed to destroy the insurgency, and at the beginning in October, I'd say 2006, and then Petraeus took over in February 2007, and until about December 2008, very early 2009, you were fighting together with the tribes, because I advised the administration strongly to go to the tribes. Actually, I wrote an article 3 years before. I wrote an article in October of 2003, and in the New York Times, and the headline was "Victory in Iraq, one tribe at a time." I meant Sunni tribe. I explained it, and it didn't. It fell like a stone in the water, and was not even no ripple, even nothing. But by 2006, already your commanders realized it had to happen. And then when Petraeus arrived, he did it big time, which he should have. And even the President Bush, joined the initiative. And if you remember, once he went especially to Anbar and not to Baghdad. I don't know if you remember that. There was a presidential visit to Anbar, but not to Baghdad, where he shook the hand of Abu Risha, Sattar Abu Risha, who started the insurgency against Al-Qaeda, and eventually joined hands with you. And this, Petraeus did very well by giving it substantial support. And Petraeus also used the, you call it the surge, right? The 30,000 extra soldiers. The surge between 2007 and 2009, by changing policy, changing strategy. So the combined thing, you can call it the surge, but it included also the tribal awakening, capital A, awakening. And this is a great success. I'll just tell you this. It took the British over 10 years to finish off as an Islamic insurgency in Malaya in 1950s, or Malaysia today, okay? 10 years, over 10 years. It took you just over 2 years to finish it off in Iraq. And it was finished off. Now, Al-Qaeda didn't die. Al-Qaeda either melted into the population and became, you know, a sleeping agent, whatever you want to call it, or they went to Syria where Assad, the same Assad who is paying now dearly for it, hosted them and helped them with weapons, with money, the same Assad. So they could regroup in Syria, not in Iraq. That was not possible. But when you left, you forsook the tribes that helped you and paid very dearly for it. Many tribal sheikhs died, were killed by Al-Qaeda. And all of a sudden, they didn't have it as their interest to do anything. So if you're looking for all, together with you, I mean, they didn't want to fight Al-Qaeda any longer. It was too risky. What I'm trying to say is all these events led to ISIS. And ISIS is the leadership, the intellectual and military leaderships of ISIS is built on Iraqis. The military on officers. The intellectual on all these guys who started to go Islamic in the last decade or decade and a half in Iraq. But you have others, you have many others, don't get me wrong. But if you're looking for the hardcore, not for the, I mean, ISIS is big, perhaps 250,000 people. Who knows? No, we don't even know how many. Maybe 200,000. But the leadership, military, Iraqi ex-Saddam military officers, anywhere between a major and one-star general, and the intellectual leadership, people who actually adopted this kind of Wahhabi Islam even in Iraq beforehand. The one more thing which I found out here in the archive, which I didn't know, didn't understand how important it was. Between 2002 and 2003, Saddam encouraged Muslim Arabs, or Muslims, let's say Muslim, to come from all over the Islamic world, to Iraq to fight the Americans if they attack. I'm talking about thousands of people. And they were the ones who fought you very bravely when you conquered Baghdad. And also along the way, many of them joined Saddam's Fidaiyin, and they fought you very bravely. The military melted away, not completely, but by and large. These guys fought you. And when you were first, if you remember, do you remember the first foray of an American brigade, armored M1 Abrams, armored brigade into Baghdad and out? Do you remember this event? They just went in and out. The brigade commander decided to see what does it mean, what's going on. So he told me that when he went in, and out, he was attacked by people who didn't look to him to be very professional. They were driving SUVs and private cars, and they were banging the private car at the tank. Banging, you know. What kind of a chance does a guy have? I am a tank, ex-tank commander myself. No chance. The bravery is incredible. These guys are today part of ISIS. They are not the commanders of ISIS, but they are fighters and they are ready to die, which is incredible. So again, all this, that's another contribution of Saddam. I'm moving to the next point. I'm just very fast forward. The question is, what do the tribes want? Today, fast forward. Look, there are three kinds of tribes among the Sunnis, Sunni tribes in Anbar, Mosul, Nineveh, three kinds of tribes. And by the way, sub-tribal units, because sometimes a tribe is split down the middle. Some units support ISIS, some units support the Americans, and well, let's say Baghdad, Abadi, the prime minister, and the Iraqi authorities in Baghdad. But generally, one part are those who support ISIS all the way, not as a tribe, but as individuals. A tribe, a sheikh would not allow you to say, I belong to this tribe, because then the tribal domain might come under American bombardment. That's not good. So, but the sheikh allows you, definitely, maybe even encourages you, to support ISIS. And you do, like individually. And ISIS is not built on tribal system. ISIS is very egalitarian, really egalitarian. Two things. A, they are egalitarian. B, they have this American thing, which I would call, there's an English, an American expression which is beautiful. I mean, if you are good, we advance you. How would you, do you have an expression? Again?
A merit system.
Yes. Merit-based service. Thank you very much, Jeff. Merit-based service. If you are good, you will rise. If you belong to tribe A, B, C, or no tribe at all, you'll rise. So they are very, yes, shall I call it meritocracy, maybe, in a strange way. Not everything is, I mean, if you chop off heads well, you'll do it again, and you'll be in charge of teaching other people. They are not nice people, they're monsters. But at the same time, meritocracy, much more so than any other Arab country, any other Arab organization I know. Because you'd always have family and tribe. It's obvious. I mean, it's traditional. In that respect, they are not traditional. Now, so today, you have this kind of tribes that basically support ISIS. Because it's not that they love ISIS, but the question is in today, like in Israeli politics, I don't know American, but certainly in Israeli politics, it doesn't matter whom you love. The question is, whom do you hate more? And that's how our politics works. It works very well, very well. If you know you hate somebody very much, then you join somebody who is his enemy, and you're okay. You don't have to love him or her. In other words, if they have to ask themselves, if they ask themselves, whom do we hate more, ISIS or the Baghdad Shi'i hegemonic government, whether it's Maliki or Abadi, we hate Baghdad more. So we work with ISIS, with all the problems that ISIS brings. That's one group of tribes. These tribes, what do they want? What do they want? Well, they want one thing, Baghdad. They want Baghdad. And then they want Karbala. And then they want Najaf. And then they want Basra. They want Iraq. They want, again, to control Iraq the way the Sunnis had been controlling it from the Ottoman era through the establishment of the Iraqi state in 1920, through the monarchy, 1921, then through the military, various military regimes and Baath regime. Nothing else is good for them unless you convince them otherwise. Okay? But that's the idea. Baghdad, much more than Damascus. Damascus is a sideshow. Even though it's paradoxical, they are more successful in Syria than they are in Iraq now. They're sort of half successful in Iraq too, but in Syria now, very successful. Even though Syria is just a launching pad to go to Iraq. But that's what they want. Another group of tribes are sitting on the fence. They're sitting on the fence. They haven't yet made up their minds. They hate equally both, and they're undecided. And they're waiting for an offer. I'll tell you what the offers are expecting, but are waiting for an offer. And the third kind of tribes are those who actually already joined Baghdad and are fighting in Baghdad as allies of Baghdad, not demanding much. They just want weapons and ammunition. That's all. And they tell us, we shall fight. We are fighting already, but we shall fight them better if you are arming us. And America would like to arm them, but it doesn't happen. It's not happening. Now, the bulk of Sunni tribes are sitting on the fence. The bulk. I'll just mention two tribal federations, mainly one. There is a huge tribal federation on the Syrian-Iraqi border, split 2/3 more or less in Iraq and 1/3 more or less in Syria. And this is a Shammar, S-H-A-M-M-A-R. They have another name, Shammar Jarba, J-A-R-B-A, Shammar Jarba. Shammar Jarba have not committed themselves. And because of that, ISIS, when they conquered Mosul, burnt the home of the sheikh of all sheikhs, of the Shammar Jarba. And he's very unhappy about it, I can assure you of that. But he's not there, he's not in Mosul, he fled Mosul, because he was not ready to commit himself. These guys are waiting for you to do something for them, but you cannot, or you would not, or you are trying and you are failing, or it's complicated. It is. It's not American stupidity here. The mistake of the American administration was to evacuate everybody from Iraq in 2011. That was a big mistake. You forsook the tribes. You forsook them, and they now don't trust you exactly. But whatever happened, it's water under the bridge. Now we are in a new era, and the question is, okay, what do they expect of you? I'll tell you. But these guys are waiting. And those who support you, like Albu Nimr, Albu Mahal, part of Al-Jubbur, part of Al-Dulaim, of Jubbur is part of Dulaim. These guys are helping you, but they are a minority. And they fight well, but they are not armed sufficiently. Definitely, they cannot compete with M1s taken by Daesh as a result of the disintegration of the Iraqi military. They have scores of M1s, the Daesh, the ISIS, scores. So, but they're with you, So the question is, what do those who sit on the fence, what do they want? And in my analysis, even some of those who are sort of fighting together with ISIS, if they receive that, they will join you eventually. I would say very generally, like an umbrella idea, they want to form a region. And Bob, you know that from Nujaifi. They want to form a Sunni region. Now this was 10 years ago. To say we want a Sunni region was totally mad. No, people hated the idea because they still were thinking we can take Baghdad as a whole and Iraq as a whole. Why should we agree to regions and weaken Baghdad because we should be the power in Baghdad, not these useless Shia? But they realize this is not happening and this probably won't happen again. So, okay, part of their resigning to reality, I would say, is to say, all right, okay, at least we would like our region and we would like influence in Baghdad, major influence, but we understand the Shia will be more influential. But the region, autonomy, like the Kurdish, it's very much like the Kurdish autonomy. We want our own national guard. You can call it whatever you like, a national guard, a militia, but it will be a national guard. The Kurds have their own name, as we all know, to these units. It has to be well armed, but not as well armed as the main army in Baghdad. That's okay. But this militia has to take orders only from the governor of the province or of the region, say 3 provinces together. He will, and no other soldier will be allowed into our area without our permission. Which means militarily, I don't know if it reminds you something of your own history. Does it? The early Union. Am I wrong? Am I right? The early Union, each state had its own national guard, and they didn't want the central government to intervene too much in their military affairs. Eventually, they were put under the control of the all-American command system. Okay, but that's what they have in mind right now, and they want other things. But essentially, like the Kurds, but basically that's what they want. They want the right to dig for oil. The 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 revenues will go to Baghdad, of course, like the Kurds, on principle agree, but they will have their cut according to the number of you count heads, you know. So we should have a proportional. It will be just to have our proportional. So that's what they want. Now, when Petraeus went there to talk to these guys, and he did, I expect we heard nothing, and the reason is that what I expect that happened. I didn't talk to him, so I don't know, but I'm pretty sure this is what happened. They said to him, "Can you get us a commitment from Baghdad that if we join Baghdad, we get that?" And of course, he couldn't. How could he? I suppose they also asked him, "Can you get us a commitment from the White House that if we join you, this is what happens?" He couldn't.
When was Petraeus?
It was about a month, 6 weeks ago.
Really?
Yes. Oh, yeah. He was there. Oh, yeah. He consulted with these guys. He met with lots of people. He met with the Kurds as well. So he was sent by the White House as an advisor, or by state. I'm not even sure, as an advisor. And he knows the tribes. He knows the tribal chiefs. So he couldn't give them any definite answer. He was stuck. Until you meet their basic demands, they will not join you. Now, why is it not working? It's not working because Baghdad objects. Now, in Baghdad, if you, by the way, I'll go back just one step. If you ask those tribes that work with ISIS, what are your demands? They say, we don't want autonomy, Kurdish style. No. We want a highly centralized Iraq, except we want to be united. I heard it from somebody, not just inventing it, I can't say from whom. We want Iraq united like the donkey and its rider. Except now the donkey is the Sunnis and the rider are the Shias. We want it this way, that's all. We want to be the rider, the Sunnis, and the Shias will be the donkey, and that's good. That's what we want. And so they, of course, are against autonomy. What? We shall give the Shias autonomy? No way. But do they have a chance of ever achieving such an ambitious goal? I'm not so sure. I think no. Well, that's how they think now. And that's how ISIS thinks. Now, ISIS, in fact, is much more extreme. ISIS wants to eliminate the Shia altogether or to force them into conversion. And that's, again, not going to happen. So these are the Sunnis. Now, what do Shias want? I'll tell you something. The Shias don't have a vision. The Shias don't have a vision. Abadi is very close to the American position. Yes, closing a deal with the Sunnis on an autonomy, even National Guard. Well, but he has some supporters. I won't go into all the list, but strangely enough, Iski or the Hakim family, who were in the Iranian pocket, are now not in the Iranian, but they support him. And a few other people, groups, but the main opposition are the Shia militias that are financed, armed, and trained by the Iranians and instructed by the Iranians. About 5 or 6 different militias that now everybody goes there because there is war and there is danger. And Sistani said, join the military. They didn't join the military, they joined the militias, but doesn't matter. They say no because Iran says no. And a few leaders, and the most surprising one is Muqtada Sadr. Muqtada Sadr is not pro-Iranian. I would like to make it very clear. Muqtada Sadr is very anti-American and mildly anti-Iranian. Mildly. He doesn't want Iraq to be under the Iranian thumb, absolutely. At the same time, Muqtada Sadr is a centralist. He doesn't, even though he supports Abadi on practically everything. Maliki is the politician that heads the anti-Abadi concepts and anti-Abadi everything. So Maliki is still very much at the background. maybe foreground. But Muqtada Sadr, who killed many of your people and who seemed to be an Iranian puppet, is not an Iranian puppet. He never was, actually. And he says, well, I support Abadi all the way to kick the Iranians out, to keep them at arm's length. Well, yeah, sure, sure. And I'm not really anti-American. But I disagree with his idea of decentralized Iraq. No way. So Abadi is being hamstrung, being constrained severely, even by his own main backer, which is Muqtada Sadr. Furthermore, Abadi doesn't have really a government. What he has is something very disparate. He doesn't have a group of people who can really make a difference, even though he's not a bad guy, but he doesn't have any experience. So, yes, he's much better than Maliki, but the result is still the same. For example, I know that the White House, I know it for sure, wanted to send weapons to the tribes, to the Sunni tribes, and to the Kurds. But while Congress suggested to send it independently to the Kurds and to the tribes, Congress realized that there is an American law that you cannot do it unless you recognize them as a separate state, right? So Congress had itself limitations. And the White House said, well, because of that, we cannot give them anything. We are going to give it to Baghdad, provided that Baghdad agrees to give it to them. And this happened, but nothing got to the tribes and nothing got to the Kurds. So the White House doesn't know what to do about it. The White House is stuck itself. I can talk about options, but anyway, so you see why everything is completely. I'll just, to make things more complicated, I'll just say that certain Sunni leaders object to the whole idea of decentralization. Each one of them has his own reasons. I'm not saying the reasons may be good or bad, but that's why the Sunni camp, as you can see, these tribes, and some politicians will say yes, other politicians say no, I can give you the names, that will make a big difference. Very confused. I cannot say I know of a united Sunni approach, but I can say the vast majority of Sunnis, yes, they support the decentralization today. The Shiis are also split, as you can see. I have a friend who now in Baghdad, and he's just been to Najaf, to Karbala. And he spent there a whole week, and he speaks fluent Iraqi Arabic, not Israeli Arabic, not American Arabic. He speaks really Iraqi Arabic. And he spoke to everybody in the street and in the mosque and in the governor's office and everywhere. We had a whole week to talk. And he really knows how to ask questions. And he asked people, and he said, 8 out of 10 people said, we don't care if the Sunnis want to have like an autonomy like the Kurds. Who cares? What does it matter? Let them have it, you know. But Shia politicians understand, even Abadi does, even though he's relegating in less important place. But Shia politicians understand one thing which is very serious for them. If they agree to the principle of decentralization and regions, autonomous regions, like Kurdistan today, and by the way, it's perfectly, it's in the Constitution. It's constitutional, absolutely constitutional. Article 120, 121, maybe 119, I'm not sure. Anyway, Bob knows, because he's been working on it recently. It's 100% constitutional, but not everything constitutional is acceptable to everybody. And the Shia politicians are saying, wait a minute, stanna shvoye. If we allow a Sunni region, and there is already a Kurdish region, then the place where all the Iraqi, almost all the Iraqi oil is coming from, Basra, together with Nasiriyah, where much oil is coming from, and together with Amara, from which another chunk of oil. This is Iraq's oil. They will demand to be also a region, a Shia region within Iraq. If they demand to be a region, this is a disaster. If the Sunnis want, they don't have anything. Maybe. But if the Shia want, and they will, they say they will. They are saying they will. They are saying it. Then what problems we have? the areas that produce 90% of our oil will be an independent, not independent, okay, autonomous region. And they can say, we would like to have a cut more than the rest because it comes from our own soil. Isn't that a problem? It's a huge problem. So that's the point. Now, what's happening today? What can America do? I would say Americans don't have many good options. That's very, very true. But my advice would be to smuggle big time weapons to the Kurds and to the Sunni tribes whom you know will work with you. And there was a way of telling. At least provide them with weapons. Though certainly you can say, they're not yet with us because we haven't given them commitment for the big demands. But at least I would say those Sunnis who are fighting on your side already, talk about 3-4 tribes, at least them, they are giving their support, they are fighting, they are dying. Not for you, for themselves. They're not dying for you. Why not smuggle to them sufficient weapons so they could really help you much, much more than they do now, and they do already. That's number one. Number two, now who can do it? The CIA can do it. Now, number two, and this is risky. This is risky. And Norton warned me against it, but because I'm not the president of the US of A, I can say it. Maybe Obama won't be able to do it, but I can say it, right? Go to Abadi, and it's not just about Abadi is close to you in any case about this autonomy and National Guard and the whole story. But you need to make it public enough that even Muqtada Sadr will see it, and everybody else, even the pro-Iranian militias will see it. They have to be aware of the danger if they don't behave, and the danger is leak it somehow, but it has to, I can have some ideas whom to leak it to, but it doesn't really matter. America is going to send very large shipments of weapons to these guys, to the Kurds and to the tribes who are ready to help you. And even America is ready, if you don't agree to our idea of, accepting the principle of regions, of autonomy, if you don't agree to that, we are going to withdraw all our forces that are helping now against ISIS. We shall not withdraw them from Kurdistan, because the Kurds are working with us. Thank you very much. But we shall withdraw our air force, our advisors, our trainers. We shall not provide you with weapons. We shall completely evacuate Iraq as we did in 2011. Not Iraq, not Kurdistan, but the Sunni areas, the Shia areas, Baghdad, completely evacuated. We shall go home. Yankee, go home. When you do this, two things will happen. First of all, for the first time since you started helping Baghdad, as different from helping the Kurds, which you should have done anyway, and you did, to your credit. Maybe not enough, but you did. The first thing which will happen would be that all the pro-Iranian forces that are now strongly against autonomy and this and that will have to rethink. There is a new situation. And that is a problem, a serious problem. Another thing that will happen, the Iranians, who right now don't want this to happen, I mean, autonomy, decentralization, of course they don't want it. They want Baghdad, their guys, to control the whole of Iraq. The Iranians will have to rethink, because if the war against ISIS goes wrong, and they have to take it into account after Ramadi, after the amazing conquest of Ramadi or Mosul a year ago, Ramadi now, June 14, June 15, wow. They have to think about the unthinkable, namely that ISIS will be very powerful and will start moving again. Rather than fighting godforsaken battles in Syria, will send most of its troops under good military leadership, back to Iraq, And they'll take not just Ramadi. By the way, Fallujah is in ISIS' hands. I don't know if you know that. Fallujah is in ISIS' hands, by and large. Complicated, but yes. They'll go to Abu Ghraib. Abu Ghraib is what, 30 kilometers from Baghdad? They'll go to Abu Ghraib. And if you don't stop them, who knows? They might conquer some Sunni neighborhood in Baghdad. Who knows what they'll do? These guys are not totally powerless. So the Iranians will have to think hard, what do we do about that? If the Americans are pulling out, which we all the time say we would like to happen, but they don't really want it to happen, we have to send our people. Now the Iranians don't want, I know the Iranians are believed to be great imperialists and so on. In a way they are, in a way they are not. Doesn't really matter how you define them. The point is, the Iranians will be ready, already have always been ready to fight until the last Arab. They don't want Persians, Iranians to die on the battlefield. They had enough after 8 years of war with Saddam. Thank you very much. So for them, even for them, an American threat like that will be a problem. They'll have to send volunteers. They have some already, of course. But the Jerusalem brigade and so on, but that's not a huge force. But they'll have to send, cannot even tell you how many. 50,000 volunteers? 70,000 volunteers? I don't know. I don't think they want that. So they'll have to think too. The problem that Norton pointed out to me, and then if yes, yes, if no, no. And then you'll have to accept the fact that ISIS is becoming stronger. Yes, it's a huge problem. I cannot deny it. A huge, huge problem. But if you threaten to do it, and I can suggest it, I'm just a university professor. Nobody cares about university professors. They don't matter. The only thing they can do is bring some crazy ideas and then go home and have lunch, you know? So here's the crazy idea. If you do that, I'm not talking yet about Congress and about Washington. This is just Iraq, okay? Iraq and Iran. I'm talking about the area, not Washington. If you do that, you have to mean it. You have to absolutely mean it. If you don't mean it, people will know and will not take you seriously. And then they'll call you a bluff without any hesitation. I'll just tell you something funny about my sister, okay? My sister is a lovely, lovely girl. And she married a terrible husband. He was really a monster. I mean, he never hit her, but was very rude to her. You call it, I think, psychological abuse. He was very good at that. And one day she came to me and said, Amatzia, she had already three little girls, 3 little daughters, lovely, lovely daughters, and she was really distraught. So I said to her, Kochevet, her name is Kochevet, like in English, the starlet. I said, Kochevet, listen what you do. You go to Avik, your husband, and you tell him, if he is not changing overnight, you are going to leave him overnight. But I want her. You have to be serious. Work on yourself. Get ready to do it. Be on the very verge of doing it when you speak to him. Because if you bluff, he'll call your bluff immediately. And your life is bad. She took a month to prepare herself to be on the verge of leaving the guy. And after a month, she came to him and said to him, Avik, I think I'm going to leave you. Unless, not I think, I'm going to leave you unless you change your behavior overnight. He changed his behavior overnight. And I mean overnight. I mean, it happened in one night. Yes, in one night it happened. And ever since, he's a pussycat. Would you believe that? Now it really, we say in Aramaic, bedidi hava uvda, this is Aramaic. It happened to me. I saw it myself happening. So if America makes a threat, America must be ready to pull out completely and to take those, the consequences, everything, which is very, very dangerous. I agree. I'll end by saying what Norton alerted me to is that may be the right thing to do in the area. But when it gets to Washington, D.C., the president will get so much flack if he leaks it, if he does it, that he cannot do it. If this is true, then you are denied the most powerful tool you have to change Baghdad's opinion. You have other options, but there is one more option, okay, which is, this is really crazy. I mean, this is crazy enough, I agree, but I have a much more crazy option. You tell Baghdad, hey guys, you don't have to agree to anything, you do what you like, but there's a complete freeze in Baghdad. We know that, all right, okay. We are sending a mechanized division, American fully fledged mechanized division, to Kurdistan. Through Turkey, the Turks will agree. Because the Turks also they are on very good terms with Barzani and not on good terms with Baghdad. So my guess is they might agree. Unlike 2003. One division. It will start from Erbil or somewhere in Kurdistan and start moving across the Sunni area like this, rambling across the Sunni area. And they will conquer Mosul in no time. They'll conquer the whole area in no time. No time, I mean 2-3 months, because you don't want to kill civilians. You cannot destroy the place and kill everybody. You are very, in that case, very good. So you have to be careful. But yes, it will take 2 or 3 months, and ISIS, militarily speaking, is out. And now you are working completely separately with the Sunnis and the Kurds. You are not declaring them a state. No, you just work with them. And now you turn to Baghdad and say, okay, if you agree, in any case now you have Kurdish, Sunni, Shia. If you agree to the decentralization program, soon enough we go home. But then when we leave it already in place. Everything is in place. Baghdad is still the center, but this is like autonomous. Will that convince Baghdad to change position? I suppose yes, definitely. I'm absolutely sure about that. Can this administration, or any administration, send a mechanized division with all that it needs to Erbil and start moving west like I don't know what.
Like mowing the lawn, Tony.
Say it again. Like mowing the lawn. It's a very good expression. Mowing the lawn. Can they do that? I do not know. My job is to bring up ideas. Your job is to knock them down. So be my guests. But on the whole, that's it. I'll just tell you about scenarios. I see 5 different scenarios. I won't go into details. The most likely one, things stay the way they are. Well, you know how they are. I'm not going to talk about it. The next one is Baghdad agrees. Baghdad agrees to regionalization, and then I see most Sunnis joining your battle against ISIS. They'll have a reason to do it, and they are saying it. I hear them saying it. So I believe them basically, even though I don't trust you. But once Baghdad says yes, and it's up front and official, and America is behind it too, completely, and Europe, I suppose, then our world, then it's okay. So these are the 2 sort of options. There is a third option. I won't go to more than the 1/3. The third option is that Iran, for whatever reason, I don't see it very likely, decides to send 70,000 volunteers and to actually take Mosul and then take Anbar all the way to the Syrian border. If they do that, they can do it with maybe 100,000 volunteers. Maybe they can do it, yes. Not easy, but they can do it. The problem is that once they do it, you'll have 2, 3, or 4 million refugees extra beyond what you have now. Like Tikrit is empty. Tikrit, once they conquered it, it's empty. You'll have a horrible crisis between the Sunni Arab world and the Shia and Iran, because now Iran is conquering a Sunni area. I mean, this is now like this. And everybody will be in trouble, including the Iranians themselves, who are reluctant to do it. So this is a scenario. I'm not saying it's very likely. No, it's not. But most likely, things will stay the way they are. Your help is good. You can give more help. And I'll just end by saying, the idea of, I think you call it embedding American fighters, like special forces with Iraq units, is not a bad idea. It's a reasonable idea. Except if you do that, then they are in battle positions. They are in battle positions. They may many of them will get killed. And battle positions, you don't want to put them now in battle position. This is your policy now. So that's not so easy to do, even though the idea, I heard it from Jeff for the first time. Yes, the unit will fight better. The Iraqi military units. Right now, those who are controlling the battlefield, really controlling the battlefield on the Iraqi side, are the militias. And Qasem Soleimani, Iranian commander of the Iranian Quds Force. He is in charge. The Minister of Defense, Khalidi, is not in charge. The Prime Minister, not in charge. The Chief of Staff, not in charge. And that's mainly because of Ramadi, but Ramadi came on top of Mosul. 1 year later, it showed that the military has been, was really humiliated. And the Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense. So, right now, the battlefront is in the hands of the militias, and they are pro-Iranian. And that's a major problem for you. Thank you very much. You hear it? Okay. Sorry.
My role here is to provide a commentary, which is not to say critique, but a commentary. Because since hearing my colleague's thesis many months ago now, I embraced it. I think there's very strong evidence, which you provided as a good historian, and unquestioned documentation of the infusion of ISIS with former Baathists. My comment is that many policymakers in Washington are attempting to accept this, but they're attempting to determine how infused the military leadership of ISIS is with Islamist ideas. And to them, it seems that this kind of winking collaboration that was set in motion by Saddam Hussein has now become fulminant, severe, that is severe, agonistic, that is to say, based on violence, and chiliastic. That the Pomeranian Grenadier of the Napoleonic Wars was the descendant of North German Lutheranism, and his descendants were singing Onward Christian Soldiers as they were members of the Einsatzgruppen in Poland and the Soviet Union. So that while there's a patina of Baathist, Anbar, Sunni nationalism, the fear among policymakers here is that it's become, in adopting Islam, it has become onward Muslim soldiers, in which the program of reformation begins with killing. You create, it's not, perhaps the National Socialist ideal is not correct. Perhaps it's the dictatorship of the proletariat, where you begin the dictatorship of the proletariat and the creation of a proletarian state by killing. The first step of creation is murder. The first step of creation of this new Islamic state, Sunni and Anbari, is murder. That's where we are. And that's the fear, that perhaps the Anbar tribes now, who were originally Baathist and winking at Islam, have become something else, Salafist. My second comment in responding to your very articulate reflection of American options. And I think an accurate reflection of American options. Must include a recognition, and there is a recognition among the policymaking community here, that once this administration and the United States government has put its chips on the table into the center on the basis of a central government in Baghdad, that we will support an Iraqi government, then you have dictated that you cannot and will not ship arms to the Anbar tribes separately. We've put our chips on a body. We put our chips on a body. He has to work. Secondly, after I wrote about this saying, open up H4 in Anbar and ship those poor people some weapons, I received a call from an officer in the military who said, if we ship those Anbar tribes, the descendants of Sitta Abu Rishor, if we ship them, they'll end up in the hands of ISIS. Those guns will end up in the hands of ISIS. That's how they get supplied. We can't do it. We don't trust the tribes, and we've had problems with them before. Remember, these are the tribes who shaped, as you correctly point out, shaped the awakening. But they were with Al-Qaeda before the awakening.
Yes, of course. Yes.
And then all of a sudden it was, it's Al-Qaeda. We'll kick Al-Qaeda out of here, and then we'll be part of a new Iraq until ISIS comes along. And then we'll be with ISIS. And so there is a certain impatience in the American government with me and other advocates who say, just ship the tribes weapons. And I'll say, no, I'm not going to do that. We are placing our bets on a body, and we are. The problem, I'm sorry to go on for just another couple minutes. A colonel in the U.S. Army used this metaphor with me about means and ends. He said, yeah, ISIS is a problem, but it's not the end of the world. This isn't the apocalypse, Mark. ISIS isn't going to end up in Baghdad tomorrow morning. Let's get some perspective here. And here's the perspective, means and ends. The Obama administration has said, the rise of ISIS is a threat to our national security and stability in the Middle East. So, he said, it's like Steve Jobs goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, listen, you have cancer. It's bad. And Steve Jobs says, well, I have a lot of money. There are herbs out there, some tea. I can spend a lot of money. If it doesn't work, right? So he goes and drinks some tea for 3 months. He goes back to the doctor and he says, it's not working. I'll follow your diktat. And the doctor says, it's too late. It's too late. So my friend in the Army says, do the Army Mechanized Division, put it in Erbil and have it move. The problem is that ISIS is not a threat to our national security. It's not going to end up in downtown Baghdad tomorrow. And the position that the United States has adopted is train and equip, which has never worked. Mm-hmm. It didn't work in Vietnam, didn't work in China at the end of World War II. It never works. But it's not intended to work. What it's intended to do is to put American soldiers on the ground, 3,500 or so, until Anbar's tribes do what they did in 2005. And they decide to say, we can't put up with ISIS anymore, we're turning. We want to be there when that moment happens, because the Iranians are there now. We would like to take advantage of it instead of the Iranians. That's the plan. It's not a bad plan. It means a lot of bloodshed and a lot more death will happen, but this is war, and it's what happens in war. So waiting is often a way to victory. It's very often a way to victory, where, as we've learned over the last 2 decades in Afghanistan and Iraq, we certainly learned that the 1st Mechanized Division sweeping west to the Syrian border is probably not the way to victory. So we got Al-Qaeda, we did it again, and then we got ISIS. And this is going to have to be sorted out by them. That's where the American policymaking establishment now is now, I think. And with that, I will throw it open for discussion and your response to me, of course. Thank you.
All right, you want to respond?
Yeah, very briefly, just a few words. About the weapons of the tribe. These officers are making a mistake. What you need is very precise intelligence about each tribe, each sub-tribal unit, because some tribes are split down the middle. I can tell you, I have checked it, and I think this is the best information that is so far available to anybody who is not in the military, in American military. You have 2 tribes. One is called Abu Nimr. They are in Ramadi, they are in Heat, and in one more town along the Euphrates. And you have another tribe, Abu Mahal. I'm just giving you a practical example. They are very far in the north, on the Syrian-Iraqi border. Both tribes have been fighting on your side for the last year. Fighting. I wouldn't doubt, I can tell you why they, by the way, those were the very first 2 tribes. You have to understand a little bit. The problem with American military is that they don't have institutional memory for anything but purely military affairs. But because I'm going to publish now a big article about that, the first 2 tribes that turned to you for help against Al-Qaeda, and I'm talking about early 2005, long before Casey, long before Petraeus, were Abu Nimr and Abu Mahal. And they have very good reasons why they want to work with you against Al-Qaeda, even if Baghdad is not yet giving them any commitments. And they did it with you from 2005. Incredible. So if your people don't know whom to turn to, of course they are right. They'll give the wrong unit, or wrong sub-tribal unit, good weapons. This sub-tribal unit is fighting alongside ISIS anyway. So I'd say, okay, I agree with them, but you have to be very careful. It has to be at this stage, very carefully calibrated. Whom, where, when, what, how much. And then it won't go to ISIS. About a mechanized division, I don't know. I guess I don't know. I don't see it as a solution, but I see it as the way towards the solution, because then Baghdad will have to do something. Now, strangely enough, this is strange, but I think this could be the case. Had the president now turned to Abadi and said, would you object that I send an armored or mechanized division to Erbil and start moving west? My guess would be that Abadi would say, well, I want some commitment from you there. Yes, the answer is yes. So is it the solution? No. But it could be the beginning of the solution. Now, about one thing which is really truly important, most important. You said something like the tribes, well, yes, Al-Qaeda went and then they came back and now it's ISIS. It's true, of course, we know, factually it's true. But why did the tribes all of a sudden stopped fighting Al-Qaeda? Why? You won. I can tell you by early 2009, 95% of Al-Qaeda terrorism was finished. How come? In 2 years, in just over 2 years, you managed to produce a miracle. And the reason was quite simple. The tribes trusted you. They worked with you. And the president visited Ramadi and shook the hand of Abu Risha. 2 weeks later, Abu Risha was very dead. That's another story. But didn't matter. His cousin Ahmad joined the fray and helped you. By the way, Abu Risha is with you too, so it's a third tribe. And they are with you since then, all the time. And they're with the government all the time, with you and the government. So what I'm saying, you have to differentiate. If you don't, that's my field. I don't claim to any great fame. I just studied the tribes. And this is where your expertise is needed. And you need to know whom you can trust today, and yes, you can, whom you will be able to trust once you arrange for something that Baghdad will do for them, and whom you really cannot trust. I can give you a number of tribes who you never can trust. And work with them. So again, it's not a coincidence, or it's not like in the nature of the tribes to move from Al-Qaeda to America and then from America to Al-Qaeda and or ISIS. It's not in the nature of the tribes. The tribes are doing what's good for them. In my book, I'm saying that you cannot buy a tribe, nowhere, no way, but you can rent a tribe. That's all you can do. So if you know whom to turn to and whom not to turn to, you are a much more solid ground. Nothing is 100%, I agree, but you are okay. You're basically okay. And you were in 2007, 8, and 9. Then you left them, you betrayed them. Hey, what do you expect of them? Well, what should they do? The tribe looked, you see, you are back in Washington. The tribe, or in Fort Leavenworth, the tribe needs to survive. The tribes, for them, it's a survival issue, absolutely survival. So when they see that the boss is gone and doesn't pay attention to them any longer, they have to maneuver. It was not like the tribes, they don't care. No, they care very much. They care about their own interest. You have to create for them an interest to join you. So that's basically it. Apart from that, what I said, I know is very unorthodox. It's very, maybe slightly sort of off the...
Unorthodox all the time.
Anyone want to ask a question, make a comment?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Amatzia. You began by going back to 1979. And of course, it wasn't long before that Saddam really carried out the consolidation of power in Baghdad, because in earlier phases, you had a different Ba'athist leadership that was not as militarist and, really was more modern and progressive. But those people got wiped out. So 1979, Saddam's consolidated power, the Iranian Revolution happens, and the third thing that happened in the same time frame was towards the spring of 1979, Brzezinski prevailed on President Carter to sign a presidential intelligence finding that started the covert operations in Afghanistan, even before the Christmas invasion. And that policy involved recruiting Islamists from all over the world to assemble a capability that then became the Afghan Mujahideen. And I remember in the 1980s, on Capitol Hill, you had Michael Ledeen, Richard Pearl, all kinds of people running around with Hekmatyar and people like that, and they were being lionized as the great freedom fighters against the Soviets. There was no sense of understanding of the Frankenstein monster that was being created. I'm not convinced that lesson's been fully learned yet. We're talking right now about bad ISIS in Syria, but good army of conquest, which is at its core the Nusra Front. We talked last week that on the border area between Israel and Syria, there's assistance being given by the Israelis to some of the Nusra fighters because they're seen as a better alternative to ISIS. So it looks to me like there is still a stubborn lack of understanding. So when you suggest we need good intelligence to differentiate among the tribes, I say we haven't even figured out the bigger picture of what's going on in the region. And so that I think that there are other problems that confront U.S. policymakers, which has been a stubborn refusal to really develop an in-depth understanding of the nature of the problem. And I'd like both yours and maybe Mark's comments on that. A lot of other things I could ask, but I think that's the main thing I wanted to raise.
You have to hand the mic back? Yeah.
say something? First of all, I agree. There is no understanding sufficient. Even Israel, we are living there. You are far. You are here. We are living there, and we are making sometimes tragic mistakes along the same lines precisely. I'll even go further back. In the 1970s, before 1979, 1980, we were not exactly supporting, but we were allowing a lot of freedom to Hamas in Gaza. Why? Because they were killing Fatah people. And we saw Yasser Arafat as a main danger, and Fatah. And here is a harmless religious Islamic organization, akin to the Muslim Brothers, but who cares? And they are killing Fatah people. They couldn't be that bad, could they? So we didn't support them. They didn't need our support. They just were allowed to thrive, education, everything. And now we are eating it. Now we are having, just like you and the Mujahideen, exactly. About the present situation in Syria, I think you know very little. We know very little. In Iraq, I claim at least that I know more, much more. But in Syria, I know very little. And the only thing Israel is doing now, which is a fascinating point that you brought up, the only thing that Israel is doing now is let's do something with those who are absolutely closest to our border, to the Golan border, and make sure that they don't shoot at us. That's all. So these are people who, some of them are Jabhat al-Nusra, some of them are just local. There are about 100 such organizations in Syria, more or less. And just in the Golan Heights, about 6 or 7 of them. Each village has its own militia, whatever, and there are a number of villages. So we are getting in touch really with the villagers and trying to, and managing so far, to show them that it's not worth it to attack Israel. You have a bigger problem, and that's not Jabhat al-Nusra so much. They are close to Jabhat al-Nusra, but they are not themselves so hardcore. But ISIS is an enemy, definitely enemy. And of course, President Assad, and of course, Hezbollah. They are their enemies. Shooting at them, we are not. And we are, so as I'm sure you know, we have already treated at least 1,500 of their wounded. So we are patching them up. By the way, many of them civilian, but I'd say about 50%, more or less. Civilians, no problem, but warriors too, fighters. They belong to local militias of various villages, and they are close to Jabhat al-Nusra. But they are not hardcore Jabhat al-Nusra. And we are patching them up. The civilians, whatever we need to do, we shall do. But fighters. And we are sending them practically good as new, back to fight against the bad guys. Okay? So we are not doing anything which is like the Americans and the Mujahideen. We are not providing them really with any meaningful weapons. Here and there some ammunition, Russian, in which we have mountains of Russian ammunition. A little bit here. I even couldn't get full information about that, but certainly medical. And so what we hope is, okay, at least they'll see that it serves their purpose, not to shoot at us, but to shoot in the other direction. That's basically much more limited. Are we going to be successful long term? I have no clue.
You know, the word you were looking for before was you're a professor and you can be irresponsible. And I'm a professor and I'm going to be irresponsible. I know very little. Jeff knows a lot. Jeff said, he said, we need in-depth understanding. That was he said. Let me focus on Syria, which we know nothing about. I'm not a defeatist, incidentally. I think as we gain deeper and deeper understanding, it will not lead to action necessarily, because we'll learn the sort of thing you've just mentioned. On a bigger scale, more remote, since we don't know as much or not there, we don't have the feel, You know, there are all sorts of splintered interests and factions, and some are good and some are bad, and they can be rented or they cannot be rented. I just don't know. Lawrence of Arabia is not here with us to organize them over a period of time. So we're just going to muddle. And the point you mentioned before about the mechanized division, that's not going to happen at this time. Now, will it happen if Lindsey Graham's elected, but he won't be? Then it might. It might not, because it might be. But it's just not going to happen. It's like other things in America today. I sat next to the head of the FBI in the District of Columbia the other day at an iftar. And these Turks were there, and they said, why don't you take away people's guns? And this is the good guy, young Andrew McCabe. And it's not the politics of today to take. We're not going to take on NRA. Now, maybe the president will be tempted. Probably won't be successful, probably. So I think we're in a time of lack of organizable will, no matter how deep our understanding is for now. That's my feeling. Listening to you know a lot more about Iraq, of course, and most of us know nothing. I think this is not a very good time for high morale. You know, that's what Tolstoy said, that the general in War and Peace, spoke about the morale the Russian people had. I don't see America having organized morale right now, in part because we will never gain sufficient organized intelligence and understanding to persuade ourselves to act. That's my feeling about this, which is not to say we're going to walk away. We'll not walk away. We'll muddle. We'll do things, of course. We will, and we'll bomb, and we'll do this. But we're not going to have mechanized unit. We're just not going to happen. This is my own feeling.
All right, we'll let these two answer, and then we'll call it a day.
I think my dissenting voice to Jeff, to you, is I think that our intelligence is actually not bad. It's not bad. It probably doesn't have the depth that it could or should or might have, but I talk to policymakers in the White House or State Department or Pentagon, mostly Pentagon, all the time, and they say, well, Mark, what do you want us to do? What is it that you want us to do? And which of the groups in Syria do you think we should support? Which of the 17 major groups? Okay, we're not going to support Hezbollah, we're not going to support Assad, but this is the most complicated foreign policy issue we're facing because we don't know what to do because there are no good choices. So instead of making a bad one, we're not going to make a choice. What's wrong with that? How many exports do we get from Syria? And we say, well, yeah, but all those poor people dying. They say, yeah, it's terrible, but we can't solve it. And I think it's almost to the point in Iraq. We've made the commitment to the central government and to a body, and a mechanized division could take on ISIS, and believe me, it would be over very quickly. And then we'd have the same problem we have with ISIS or without ISIS. Or, we look at Tikrit, and I talk to the military about Tikrit, and they say the Shia militias, the Shia militias took 5 days to get 2 blocks in central Tikrit.
Yes.
We could have done it in an hour. So,
I can just
so
give you this more.
there's a limit.
The Shia militias had 30,000 people fighting, while the defenders in Tikrit were 4,000, and it took them, as you say.
Unbelievable, right? And so there's kind of a limit beyond which the Shia militias, powerful as they are, can't go. And Soleimani was recalled to Tehran after the Battle of Tikrit, and people were like, it took you this long? And we kind of look at that and we say, it's not great, but Iran's not about to take over Iraq, and ISIS isn't about, so. And how many, there are more people dead in a church in Charleston than killed by ISIS. So let's get a focus. Let's get our priorities. And right here, right now, in this country,
All right, Matsuya, if you want the last word, you'll have it.
Well, you convinced me that you should continue to muddle. Okay, I have especially that God forbid if you lose a soldier or soldiers, they will be American soldiers, and that's something which I cannot possibly tell you what to do, because the lives at stake will be American lives. And I'm not even talking about the money, the lives. So of course, I mean, I can accept but it's not going to stop me from bringing up crazy ideas. So, okay, I'll continue.
All right, let's thank Mark Perry and Amatzia Baron.